Hi, my name is Sue Bouchard and I'm a traditional quilt maker. I'm here at the Festival of Quilts and I've had the opportunity to teach several different quilt patterns. One of them is called the Magic Vine, and this quilt pattern was originally developed in the 1930s during the Depressions. Now during that time no one wanted to buy a newspaper, so a woman by the name of Florence LaGanke was hired to actually put a different newspaper quilt pattern every week. The quilt that you see behind me is actually 12 of the original 22 flowers, and I'm going to show you some more detail in the book. Yes, we were fortunate enough to receive a copy of all the original articles for this quilt, and this first one that you see is the one that introduces the quilt pattern to the readers. The next quilt I wanted to show you is actually an antique quilt that was made using these original patterns. You can tell it is a series of 4 rows, and these were inspired by Jack and the Beanstalk. The reason this is called the Magic Vine quilt is because you'd never see this variety of flowers on one vine. Also notice that the first and third row are the same flowers, and the second and the fourth row are the same flowers, and then it's complemented by this nice vine and leaf border. Each one of the flowers, we start out with the original newspaper article as seen here. The stories are really great if you get a chance to read them. Next we have a complete layout page that we're going to use for our placement on our background. And then we follow it up by full-size pattern pieces and a yardage chart, and then little suggestions on how to complete each block. Now this is done for each of the 22 flowers. Let's go ahead and make this Cosmos flower using the quick turn method. The flower that we're going to do today is the Cosmos flower, and we've gone ahead and pre-printed all of the patterns for the flowers and leaves on a product called lightweight, non-woven, fusible interfacing. This pattern, as you see right here, is our Cosmos pattern. Now we go ahead and we're just going to cut out the pieces that I need to do this flower. I found some fabric that I felt would be appropriate for this flower. It's a light purple, and what I do is I just match up the bumpy side of the fusible to the right side of the fabric. The side that you see of the interfacing next to you is going to be the smooth side of the interfacing. Now that is called the wrong side of it. So all I did is I went ahead and I used a very small stitch and I stitched all the way around my pattern, and where I started I actually came back and overlapped about 1/2 inch. That just locks it off. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut around this piece approximately 1/8 inch away from that stitching. So I'm just going to cut along till I got it all cut out. You don't have to be really exact, just a rough cut. So I have that all done, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to fold my piece in half and I am just going to cut it. I actually sewed 2 petals at once, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it to determine the middle, take my scissors and just cut it. So that will give me my 2 petals. Okay, I'm going to take a regular drinking straw, and you want one that's kind of stiff. You can find these at any of your fast food places. You'll become a connoisseur on straws. So I'm just opened up the bottom and I'm inserting the straw through there. Now I'm going to roll my fabric so that the fabric side is actually over the top of the straw. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tool called a ballpoint bodkin. Now this is a really old Victorian tool, and we're going to use this ball part of it and actually put it down onto the fabric and turn it so the whole piece is going to be right side out. You can just push it through the other end. It's a very, very easy method of turning your applique pieces right side out. I'm just going to take the ball side of the bodkin and I'm going to run it around the fabric seam just to get it all straightened out. And you can see you have a perfectly turned little petal. I can't actually iron this piece because it has fusible on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a wooden iron. And by pressing the wooden iron down and starting from the middle of your shape and going outwards, I'm going to flatten the edges so they're really nice and smooth going around my petal piece. Now what I want to do is I want to kind of distribute my colors for my flower in a pleasing manner. So I've laid out all 8 of my petal patterns, and I'm going to take a long running stitch and gather them together. So I just have a needle and thread, and I did double thread that needle because I don't want to break apart. I'm going to start on the fabric side and just take 2 little stitches, and my final is going to be ending up on the fabric side as well. So I can pull my needle through, and I'm just going to continue that for all 8. Just a really nice little stitch. It's more important that it's an even stitch as opposed, you don't want a little tiny stitch because you won't get a good gather. And as you can see, as you start to pull it tight, how it's just gathering to make my flower. And when it's all completed, you end up by tying the petal 1 to petal 8, and that completes your circle. And that's going to give you a really nice relief on your flower. Now I like to put a yo-yo in the center of my flower. You can put a button or you can put any sort of kind of embroidery, but I think yo-yos are really fun and it goes with the gathering. I just started with a 2.5-inch circle, and I'm going to gently roll the edge over about 1/8 of an inch, between 1/8 and 1/4. And again, I'm going to use a long, just a running stitch just for gathering. And you're going to continue this all the way around until you pull it all tight, and you're going to get a yo-yo that looks just like that. I'm going to begin by making my 2 leaves. And just to review how we do the fusible interfacing quick turn, I started with the leaf pattern. I sewed with a very small stitch. I trimmed to 1/8 of an inch, and then using the straw and bodkin, I turned my 2 leaves right side out. To make our stem, we start with a bias strip. Now I like to cut my bias strips about 1.25 inches wide. So what I do is I have my bias strips about 5 to 6 inches long, and I'm just going to fold it in half. Now you can do this with a finger press, or you can take it over to your iron and do it. I drew a line on my background piece as a guide for my stem placement, and I'm just going to put the 2 raw edges of my stem against that and sew a scant 1/4 inch. That's a very small 1/4 inch. Once it's sewn, I just flip it over and cover those raw edges, and then I top stitch it down. Now I did it with contrasting thread so you could see where I stitched. Okay, so we have our stem completed. Once I know where my leaves are, at that point, that's when I decide where I'm just going to put my leaves down. Now this can be taken to the iron and pressed in place, and it'll stay stabilized until you can either applique it by hand, by machine, using an applique stitch, a blind hem stitch, or a blanket stitch, whatever you prefer. This quilt was put together using the traditional layout. Now what it is, it's individual blocks. Now once the blocks are completed, you sew them together and you put down a little overlapping leaf that connects the vines. And I can show you how to do that on these pieces. As I lay these blocks out, you can see how they're joined together with this little overlapping leaf to hide the bottom of each stem. And that's just how that works. This quilt was actually done with traditional cottons, but I like to work in wool embroidery as well. So I made some sample blocks just to show you how the pattern comes over in wool. So here are samples of 3 of the flowers, and you can just see how I felted the wool, and I just cut out the shapes, the same thing that we find in the book. And as you can see, when they're put together, how they're just going to look just like the other quilt, just a different texture to them. As you can see, there's many different ways you can put your flowers together. You can do it straight, you can do them on point, you can select just a few and make a nice table runner. This book offers a variety of instructions on how to complete it. I'm Sue Bouchard, and I hope you enjoy making your own Magic Vine quilt.